Hi there, and welcome to Travel and Sip, a show that gives you a taste of the world. I'm Kieran, and I'm joined by my good friend Ingrid.
Hi.
Through this show, we will share our experience and love of travel to inspire you to see what the world has to offer. So, today, Ingrid, where are we off to?
Today, Kieran, we are off to another location that we both have been to and love back in the continent of Europe, and that is Tuscany in Italy.
Ah, beautiful. One of my favorites. And Tuscany here, you can see, is kind of in the northern part of Italy, there on the western coast, and takes in a number of cities that will be very, very familiar to you. So the first of those being the capital, Florence. Florence, really steeped in history, but there's also some other familiar names that you might see here. So obviously, Pisa with Leaning Tower, Siena, Arezzo, and San Gimignano are some that we have come across quite a bit in our dealings and travelled to quite a few of these. Um, Ingrid, tell me about the first time you went to Tuscany. When was that?
Well, Kieran, I've only really been to Tuscany once before.
Is that right?
Yeah, believe it or not, of all my travel and travel in Europe as well, I've actually really only spent time in Tuscany once. I went to Tuscany 4 years ago, so 2016, and spent about a week in the regional areas of Tuscany. So yeah, came in by train into Florence, and
Oh,
then
I think we've got
there's
this photo of you here, the beautiful
in
countryside. So you caught the
yeah.
train in from Florence. Where were you? Was it a trip around Italy that you were doing, or?
It was just a couple of locations. So I actually came from Venice. So Venice via Bologna. We stopped in Bologna for a couple of hours just to have a bit of a wander around, and then from there went straight to Florence and picked up a car from Florence. So that was the easy way to do it. So just getting the train in between the big cities and then picking up the car and driving straight out of town, basically, to try and avoid that city traffic. And
That's
driving
right.
on the other side of the road is always a little bit tricky. So yeah.
And look, it's a great combo, and I've done train and car myself on trips within the region, and the train's great. Particularly, I've always seemed to be coming from Rome up to Florence. That seems to be I've done it a few times,
Yeah.
and that's I think thinking back to the days where we were both selling train tickets, Ingrid. I think Rome to Florence was one of the busiest routes that we booked, and it's about an hour and
Absolutely.
a half on the high speed service, which is always comfortable and a great trip. But it's really great. As you said, you went to some regional areas. I was lucky enough to go last year and do a similar and did a driving holiday, and it was a fantastic way just to get into the little nooks and crannies, because there are some beautiful places that are off the beaten track in Tuscany as well.
There is.
Um,
Absolutely. And we've got some wine today, Kieran, as well, that we're going to drink while we chat about Tuscany, of course.
well, indeed. And what would you say would be the main wine drunk in the region?
The Sangiovese grape. So if
Yeah,
people are familiar with the Sangiovese grape, that is absolutely the wine of the Tuscan region. And that is when you see, a Tuscan wine or a Chianti, and that sort of thing. They generally are made predominantly with the Sangiovese grape. So
great.
that's where that comes from.
And what is
Yeah.
your little tipple for today?
So for today, I wanted to get something a little bit different, but I've picked up this bottle here from a local bottle shop, and it's a Dogagiolo from Tuscany, from Carpenetto Winery. So it's a Sangiovese blend. So this one's actually got a little dash of Cab Sav in it as
Yep.
well, predominantly
Okay.
Sangiovese with a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon. So that is what I am drinking this afternoon.
Beautiful. And for
What about you?
myself, I've got a Chianti,
Yes.
which is a Santa Margherita Chianti. And look, when I was looking in the bottle shop today for a Tuscan wine, obviously went for a Chianti, which is famous from the region. But this one stood out to me. I've got a story about Santa Margherita. It's Santa Margherita. There is the Basilica of Santa Margherita in Cortona, another popular little town in Tuscany. And
Yep.
Cortona is built on a hill. Everything is uphill, and if you keep going uphill, eventually you reach the Basilica of Santa Margherita. And if you venture into the Basilica, you can actually meet Santa Margherita herself. Santa Margherita is she's quiet because she is from the 13th century, but you can go up there and visit her. And one thing when you're traveling around Europe, you see from time to time is relics and saints and these sort of things. And Santa Margherita is one of those. So she holds a special place in my heart in Tuscany, and I thought I'd drink at Santa Margherita to celebrate
Very
that.
good. Well, salute to Santa Margherita then and Italy.
Salute to indeed. All right. So look, talking about visiting the area, Florence is obviously the main city, the capital city there of Tuscany. But probably the next most famous city, arguably, would be Pisa. And Pisa, famous for, of course, for its Leaning Tower. This was my first trip back there about in 2002 to see the Leaning Tower, and it's quite a sight. Like, it's one of those things that you. Yeah, well, that's right. I know. Anyway, there you go. I think time moves on, but the Leaning Tower still leans and still at the same angle, although maybe even at a slightly increased angle, perhaps, because I think it's still moving from what I understand. But,
yeah.
And I know certainly in 2002 you could pay €15 and go up the top. I don't know if I'm pretty sure last time I went there, which was 2009, you couldn't go up there anymore because it was a little bit too dangerous. But I haven't been back there since, so if anyone knows that we could still go on there, that'd be great to know. But certainly, have you visited? Did you do Pisa on your trip?
No, I didn't. No, so whilst I've only really travelled in Tuscany once, I went out to the east from Florence. So when we picked up the car, we actually went sort of southeast from there and spent most of our time. So stayed in a villa that was it was called Villa Fontalunga, in a small, tiny little town in the middle of nowhere in central sort of Tuscany. I've actually got a photo of it up there, Kieran, but I don't know if we'll probably have a look at it later. Yeah, there it is.
Villa Fontalunga.
Beautiful. With their beautiful puppy dog that they have. So they've got a couple of dogs, the owners of the villa, and great place to stay. Fairly boutique, small, but really homely. They do, what they call family dinners a couple of nights a week, where Nonna comes and cooks up some food, and everyone sits in the courtyard together, all the guests, and it's a great way to feel, like you really got that true, authentic Italian experience. And really easy to get everywhere from there. So we really enjoyed it.
Well, that's great. And look, I've got to say, like, I know I went to this restaurant last year. Was our last time in Tuscany, and we stayed near Arezzo, and in a little place called Monticello, and went to this little restaurant here, which was I've written it down here. It's La Comendina was the restaurant, and they did this great food. We went there twice. It was just a short stroll in this little country town from where we were staying at Villa Chilnia. And the last time we went there, the waiter there who we've been talking to and making friends with, he went into the kitchen, and out of the kitchen came his mama and his auntie, and it was a whole family affair in the kitchen. And the food was just incredible. And I've got a couple of photos from inside. Like, they had all this lovely wine, beautiful, just us enjoying a little meal there, and just sensational. But the thing that really stood out, and I think you get this a lot in Tuscany, is that real family vibe, and the people are so friendly.
Yeah, they are. They love it. They love to chat. They love to learn about you, where you're from, why you want to visit their small towns. And I think that's the really great thing about being able to get out of just Florence, Arezzo, Siena, and those larger sort of towns that are perhaps the key points that people want to visit. But if you can and you're comfortable enough to hire a car or jump on a tour, for a few days, or stay somewhere where they can transport you around to some of those smaller towns, that's where you really get that true Tuscan experience, I believe.
And you get a little bit of the inside word. Like, last year when we were there, we had a friend that we knew, and he's a chef, and he took us on a trip to a little winery called Villa La Ripa, and this is This is a villa that dates back from the 16th century, and
Wow.
the first owner there's a tapestry there that was given to the owner by the Medici family. These sort of things, and this chapel with a painting from the 1600s of the villa, and the villa looks exactly the same. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to think. I think I've got some photos I can bring up in a sec, but it was just a magnificent villa that you just would never have found um, if you didn't have a car, if you were just staying in the cities, that sort of stuff. So it's really
Yeah.
great to explore. And in fact, we did a wine and an olive oil tasting there. So this was a selection of their wines, but the other thing was their
That
olive
looks
oil,
like
Ingrid, and it's beautiful. So it says Psycho, and there's a story because I've got as well their olive oil, which is a award-winning olive oil, and this too is a Psycho olive oil. Um, and the story behind that is that the owner is a psychiatrist. So he basically, the story we were told is that he named his wine and his olive oil, he had a psycho range, really to give tribute to the people who paid for him to restore this villa, because it was all those bills from patients of his psychiatry practice that foot the bill for for restoring this 16th century villa. So
wow. That's
so that was
cool.
his tribute to them.
I like it.
But really, the olive oil, I've got a little sample here, so I'm going to get it. It's so delicious. Like really, you could just drink a glass of that. Maybe I wouldn't recommend that for your health, but
It's probably not the healthiest thing to do, but dip some bread in
very
it.
tasty. Dip some
Yeah.
bread, and hey, fun fact, Ingrid, do you know that Tuscan bread is traditional at one important ingredient? Guess what that is?
I have no idea.
There's not that many ingredients in bread. Salt. It's without salt, and it actually you taste it a lot. So they have this great produce in Tuscany, like the olive oil and salamis and these sort of things that have such vibrant flavour because of the fertile ground that you just don't need salt. So don't eat the
Wow.
bread by itself because it's a little bit bland by itself, but accompanied with any of that Tuscan food, it's just delicious. So fact for the day.
There you go. That's a cool little fact. I like it. Well, if you are
So tell me a
into
bit more about your. Oh
yeah, that's what I was going to say, Kieran.
yeah,
My experience in Tuscany was very food focused as
yep,
well. So I actually went to a couple of Michelin star restaurants. So if something that
okay,
is your is what you like to experience is that real, true, food experience and upmarket food experience, then I can definitely recommend Tuscany for Michelin star restaurants. So I visited one called Arnolfo, which was a 2-star Michelin restaurant, and another one called Il Falconieri, which is a 1 Michelin star restaurant. And then went to these amazing little towns. So this is actually a picture of me in one of the little towns. So this is Montepulciano. I'm not sure if you visited Montepulciano as well,
I
Kieran, but
didn't
I
know.
loved it for their little shops they had everywhere. So they did all of these charcuterie. They made their own charcuterie. They've got the salamis hanging down and everything there. And then I've also got a photo of some cheese. So ash covered pecorino as well that they
Beautiful.
were making there. So just amazing, like just beautiful produce that you can actually go in, you can have sample and taste as well. And one of my other things that I loved about Florence, if you just, maybe you don't necessarily want to go to a Michelin star restaurant, and that's why I say, shops like this are awesome for that. But bistecca alla Fiorentina, did you have a Florentine steak while you were in Florence?
I sure did, Ingrid. Absolutely.
Yeah, got
How
to
can
be
you
one of
not?
yeah, amazing. Huge,
Oh,
big
it's so
T-bone.
it's crazy. Actually, I've got one here. So
Have you?
this is my little food odyssey.
Oh,
So there's
wow.
my Florentine steak, which was and we had that in Florence. I think it's like when in
Mm.
Rome, obviously, but when in Florence, you have a Florentine. And some of these other meals here, I found there was a lot of truffle. Did you find that in Tuscany? A lot of truffle in the meals.
Oh, really? I can't
Yeah.
remember there being a lot of truffle, but yeah, it could have been a little bit of it. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I've never had so much truffle in my life, and
Wow.
certainly this truffle pasta at La Comandina was sensational. But do you know my favourite meal was this one in the middle, and mine was the just the pasta with a tomato sauce. It was the
Yeah.
pici pasta, which is a Tuscan type style of pasta, and it's kind of thick and round, and just with a real plain tomato sauce, and it was still the dish that I can remember most fondly, I think, from that whole time, and that was in a little place in Cortona. Um,
Yeah, it's
I
amazing,
definitely
isn't it?
recommend the food. I have to say though, Ingrid, I do have one experience from one of my trips, which was in Florence, and it was not. It was a negative food experience where we
Okay.
ordered a gelato, and got there, got the gelato, started licking it, then gave a €10 to expecting some change back, and the lady says, "No, no, this is not enough." I took, what are you talking about? Behind the desk was a little sign with the tourist prices. It was €15 per gelato. Can you believe it? Which I
Wow,
think at that stage was about 50 Aussie dollars, which is just ridiculous. But
that's it. That's
and that
outrageous. Always check the
and this
pricing
is a
first.
hot tip. Always check the pricing first, exactly, and that was at the Ponte Vecchio, just at the end of the Ponte Vecchio. So if you're going to Florence and you're at the Ponte Vecchio and looking for a gelati, always ask for the price first. That's
Yes,
very good.
absolutely. Yeah.
But other than that, excellent food, excellent wine, excellent place to visit. Is there anything you would add in summary of your time in Tuscany, Ingrid?
I would say as well, my thing with the small, I think I've got a couple of other little photos of the countryside there when you're driving through as well, the Tuscan countryside. Just the small towns, taking some time to walk around. I think, finding a place where you can park your car, see this is the hills and everything around all the towns. This is what it looks like. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So
So
taking
beautiful.
some time to drive, to enjoy it. Yeah, these tiny little squares in each town. That one was Monteregione, that one there. So there's just
Mm,
some gorgeous little towns everywhere. Montalcino has a fortress that you can see as well. So there's and a couple of great wineries that I went to. So I went to one called Avignonesi winery, which you could
okay.
do a tour in. They had a beautiful restaurant where you could have lunch. And I also went to this other one that was tiny, tiny, tiny family owned winery, which was recommended by where we stayed. And it was just in the village next to Villa Fontalunga. It was called
Mhm.
Santa Victoria. And it was just spectacular. I still remember the guy, who was an older guy, showed us around. We were the only tourists there. He hardly spoke a word of English, and he just sort of showed us all different things of what he'd been doing in his winery and his cellar for, centuries, basically, with his family
Crazy.
generations. And it was incredible. I loved it. So I think just taking that
Absolutely.
time to talk to local people and see things that aren't necessarily in the big cities. I think that's important in Tuscany.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Ingrid. And it is, there's such wonderful people. And a couple of things, I have to agree with you on both points. Like, I think driving around and seeing the little towns is a must do in Tuscany. And certainly I was very appreciative that it was my first time driving in Italy last year. And you just know you're in Tuscany when we drove up from Sorrento, from the south. And after a couple of hours, you just know you're in Tuscany because you see these wonderful olive wine vineyards as you sort of get into Tuscany, and it just looks like Tuscany, rolling hills. It's such beautiful countryside, and the people reflect that. It's a place that you can relax. You can really, take a few days and just chill out and go and taste some good wine, some good food, talk to the people. The first time I was in Tuscany again, when I was backpacking around at 18. I remember my hostel was up the top of this hill, and it was about a kilometre walk up the hill. And I was walking up there with my big backpack, and this car just pulled up next to me and said "Ostello," and I gave him the thumbs up, jumped in the car, and she just lived next door. The hostel wasn't open, so there was me and a couple of other people waiting for the opening time. So she came out with her brother, who was a priest, and they brought some wine out, and we all just drank wine and just communicate, speak English, sorry, Italian. They didn't speak English, but you just converse over wine and have a friendly chat. And it's those type of experiences that really help you fall in love with the destination. And Tuscany is certainly one of those for me, I think.
Yeah, it's the best for that. So on
Absolutely.
that note, Kieran, drink well and
Yes.
travel often. Salute.
Salute to you, and until next time.